After this presentation, please visit our YouTube channel, hit subscribe and smash the like button, click the bell to get all our new content. That really helps us out. And stay until the end for more info on donating to AAM. So welcome to another educational and inspiring AAM program. This is entitled Ending Horse Racing. Did you know that 2,000 horses are killed racing or training each year in the United States? That's about 6 every day. The campaign to end horse racing is fairly new to the animal rights world. Horseracing Wrongs is an animal rights organization working to end the cruel and deadly horse racing industry in the U.S. Through its seminal FOIA reporting, Horseracing Wrongs has documented nearly 10,000 confirmed deaths at U.S. tracks since 2014. Its research shows that well over 2,000 racehorses are killed across America every year. Aortic rupture, pulmonary hemorrhage, blunt force head trauma, broken necks, severed spines, ruptured ligaments, shattered legs. In this program, you will learn about the cruel and death inherent to the horse racing industry, the work of Horseracing Wrongs, current and ongoing campaigns, and how you can join the fight to end horse racing. My name is Michelle Granberg. I'm your moderator. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey, and I've been a vegan and activist for over 6 years. Our mission at AAM is to empower activists to boldly act and equip them with what they need to fight for animal liberation. AAM is a free multinational program supporting new and fledgling animal rights activists to reach their full potential. Founded in 2020, AAM offers a free 3-month mentorship program which pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we know this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public on various aspects of animal rights activism. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person activism events around the country. AAM is proud to be fueled by FARM, the Farmed Animal Rights Movement, one of the oldest AR organizations in the country. If you're interested in applying to become a mentor or mentee or want to get involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow both AAM and FARM on social media. Okay, so that being said, we have 3 wonderful speakers from Horseracing Wrongs with us, Nicole, Patrick, and Jennifer. So we're going to start with Patrick. He's going to start us off. And please hold your questions, everyone, until the presentation is completely over. And then we'll absolutely open up for your questions and get some answers from our panel. Okay, Patrick, go ahead, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight about what has long been a secret in the animal rights community, I think, is horse racing. I just want to start with how we got started. Back in 2012, 2013, I was writing an animal rights blog for the Albany Times-Union, and I was trying to cover all the various animal-related issues. When I started researching a post on horse racing, 2 things jumped out. One, there was a dearth of information. No one knew how many horses were dying on American tracks, let alone the circumstances in which they were dying, and no one knew about the other various related cruelties. Second, there were no organizations in the country, big or small, focused on this issue. There were, of course, protests at circuses and lab animal testing, factory farming. Greyhound racing had a group totally dedicated to it, which was Grade 2K, but nobody was really representing racehorses. So I decided someone needed to fill that void in the animal rights community. So that's how I got into this. I do not have a horse background. My knowledge of horse racing was strictly on a sports level. Growing up, I was a huge sports fan. Although I didn't follow racing year round, I certainly remember watching Seattle Slew and Affirmed go for the Triple Crown. I was aware of who Secretariat was. In fact, Secretariat was named the 35th greatest athlete of the 20th century by ESPN. So it was sold to me as just another sport. So that was my knowledge of horse racing. So I really had to learn as I went. I totally immersed myself in the subject. I was able to connect with some wonderful people around the country, 2 or 3 in particular, who really mentored me regarding horses. Again, this was all new. So at the outset, I thought, okay, I'll just be kind of an aggregator of all negative stories I could find on horse racing. Obviously, I knew about drugs in racing because that's all the media ever reported. But it wasn't until I started filing FOIA requests, which is Freedom of Information Act, with each of the racing commissions around the country that I really started to understand how deep this problem ran. I was quite shocked to learn of the numbers that we were talking about as far as horses dying, and Michelle alluded to that already, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I did want to start with a broad overview of the various what I call wrongs of horse racing, just to give you an idea of how bad this industry really is. So it begins right from the beginning. These animals, of course, are bred for one specific purpose, and that's to race and to earn for their exploiters. And they are torn from their mothers and herds as babies. Typically around the age of 1, they will be separated forever from their families, herds, and they are now in the system, sold into servitude. They are what is called broken, an industry term meaning to be made pliant and submissive. And from there, the physical abuse begins almost immediately. So a horse will not fully mature until the age of 6. His bones aren't done growing, growth plates aren't done fusing until around the age of 6. In contrast, racehorses are thrust into intensive training at 18 months and raced at 2, which on the maturation chart is the rough equivalent of a 6-year-old child. Back in 2019, I testified before the New York State Senate. There was a hearing on racehorse welfare. And along with me, there was a prominent equine vet here in upstate New York, Dr. Craig Kulikowski. He spoke about these immature bodies. And one of the senators from the Saratoga region, of course, asked him, well, what's the difference between that and putting our children in Little League or Pop Warner football? And without missing a beat, Dr. Kulikowski said these animals are going right to the Super Bowl. So it's that early, incessant grinding of those unformed bodies. Again, they're years away from being fully mature. That is the primary reason that these horses break down in these shocking numbers. You hear a lot about drugs in the media, and you won't hear me talking too much about it tonight because I think it gets outsized focus. And the suggestion is that all we need to do is clean up the drugs, like baseball with steroids, and somehow horse racing can be made acceptable. The primary reason, and this will not change, and the reason it won't change is because they would never wait until a horse is 5 or 6 to begin training or racing him. The primary reason, again, is that grinding of those bodies. So in the states that give us full necropsy reports, states like Maryland, Kentucky, California, we see time and again 4, 3, even 2-year-old horses. These are pubescents, adolescents at best, dying with chronic conditions like osteoarthritis and degenerative joint disease. This is clear, unequivocal evidence of that grinding, the incessant pounding that those unformed bodies are forced to absorb. And that's the reason that they die in such shocking numbers. The next level of cruelty, and I think is perhaps the worst of it, is the unremitting confinement and isolation. So as a rule, racehorses are kept locked in tiny 12 by 12 stalls for over 23 hours a day, making a mockery of the industry claim that horses are born to run, and a cruelty all the worse for being inflicted on naturally social herd animals like horses. Another member of our advisory board, Dr. Nicholas Dodman, he's a world-renowned animal behaviorist. He contextualizes this cruelty by saying that it's akin to keeping a human being in solitary confinement. And if you've ever read accounts of humans who have had to experience solitary confinement. That'll give you a better understanding of what these horses are enduring. Again, they exhibit the same stereotypies that we used to see with the ringland elephants, if you remember, the bobbing and the swaying for the horses, the incessant kicking or digging, even self-mutilation. They do what's called wind sucking. They'll grab onto something in their stall and suck in air. Again, this is clear, unequivocal evidence of emotional and mental trauma, distress these horses are enduring. And again, for me as an animal rights person, probably for you too, that is the worst of it. Death is death, and it's horrific, of course, but it's that unremitting everyday cruelty of confinement. And that's how the vast majority of racehorses are kept day in and day out. Relatedly, all the horses' natural instincts and desires are thwarted. Again, Dr. Kulikowski, going back to that vet here in New York who testified before the Senate, he said that keeping these animals locked up like that would be like keeping a child locked in a 4x4 closet for 23 hours a day. Can you imagine that? The next level of cruelty is the control and the subjugation. So the racing people thoroughly control every moment of their assets' lives. It's control that is often effected through force and intimidation, pushing and shoving, pulling, yanking, goading, prodding, and through the tools, the various tools of their trade, things like nose chains, lip chains, eye blinders, tongue ties, metal mouth bits, which, by the way, Dr. Robert Cook, an expert in equine ear, nose, and throat, said that not only does the bit cause physical pain in the horse's mouth, it's being shoved up into the soft palate. The bit is used, in case you don't know, as another tool of control. It's how they control the animal. But in addition, he says that horses are obligate nose breathers. And when they're running in nature, they have to have a tight lip seal. These bits prevent that tight lip seal. So Dr. Cook, after viewing photos of horses at Saratoga Racecourse last summer that a photographer friend of ours took, said that all of those horses racing on that day, and this is at probably the premier track in the entire country, all of those horses racing on that day were going to experience feelings of asphyxiation, suffocation, and he likened it to waterboarding. This is an expert. It's one thing for me to say it. I can say that's cruel, what they have in that poor horse's mouth. But when you have an expert saying it, it carries an entirely different weight. And of course, there's whips. So if you saw someone whipping his dog in the park, you would call 911 and that person would be arrested on the spot for felony animal cruelty. The track is just part of the tradition. And make no mistake, whipping hurts the horses. I have scientific evidence on the website attesting to that, and quotes from people within the industry admitting that, of course, the whip hurts. That's why they use it. It's to control it's another form of control and subjugation on these horses. Then there's the commodification. So by law, racehorses, all horses are literal chattel, pieces of property to be bought, sold, traded, and dumped whenever and however their people decide. What's more, the average horse will change hands several times over the course of his so-called career, adding anxiety and stress to an already anxious, stressful existence. This near constant shuffling among trainers, grooms, vets, barns, states is a primary reason why 90% of active racehorses suffer from chronic ulcers. Another level of cruelty that you hardly ever hear about in the media, but it exists with these horses, these poor animals. And then, of course, there's death. So as Michelle said at the top, we have been filing FOIA requests with racing commissions around the country since 2014. And we have to date documented almost 10,000 deaths on the website. That's names, dates, locations, details. We estimate that over 2,000 horses are dying across America every year. That's about 6 every day, as Michelle said. Can you imagine 6 kills per day? And this for an industry that is fundamentally a gambling industry. So in order for people to bet, we are killing horses at the rate of 6 per day. And most people think that it's usually just a simple fracture and a quick euthanasia solution, and it's over. The reality is far worse, of course. So in addition to those shattered legs, which we see bones protruding through the skin, bones shattered into multiple pieces, we also see things like what the industry calls sudden cardiac events or cardiovascular collapse. These horses' hearts are just giving out, and most of them, of course, are still pubescents and adolescents. They die of pulmonary hemorrhage, so they bleed out from the lungs. They die of blunt force head trauma from collisions with other horses or the track itself. They die of broken necks and severed spines and ruptured ligaments. So as you can see, it's not just a simple leg fracture, quick shot, and it's over. There's an immense amount of suffering beforehand. They also die back in their stalls, and this is something that has changed since we came on the scene. So when we first started, I was reporting stall deaths along with the track deaths. And initially, we were getting pushback from racing supporters saying it's unfair that you are holding the industry accountable for a horse who dies back in his stall from a thing like colic or laminitis, because horses get colic and they suffer from laminitis everywhere horses are kept. Well, first off, they're at a higher risk for those types of maladies. And just so in case you don't know, colic is an excruciatingly painful abdominal condition, and laminitis, I have been told by people that is probably the most painful thing a horse can experience. It's inflammation in the feet. Racehorses are at a higher risk for these maladies. But also, I bring it back to this, and I always use this historical analogy. I'm a history buff, and most of us are somewhat aware of 650,000 soldiers dying in the American Civil War. It's a figure that we were taught in school, but we weren't taught that 2/3 of those soldiers died of disease in the camps. No historian has ever tried to draw a distinction between a soldier dying of dysentery in the camp and one dying of a gunshot wound on the battlefield, nor should they, of course. The same thing with these horses dying back in their stalls. They are still very much active racehorses in between races, and again, most of them still in puberty or adolescence. So we have the track deaths, and then we have the stall deaths, and then, of course, we have slaughter. So we don't have a definitive number because the industry makes it that difficult to get that kind of a number. But we do know how many American horses are shipped across our borders each year to go to slaughter. Just as an aside, the last equine slaughterhouses on U.S. soil closed in 2007. They haven't been prohibited by law, they've just been defunded. So there's no funding for USDA inspections, therefore they can't open up. But now we just ship them. So these horses are trucked, crammed into these trailers, and by law, by USDA regulation, they can go up to 28 hours without food, water, or rest. So what the industry does is they use middlemen, where years ago they would have what we call the meat man would pull up on the backside of these tracks on a Friday afternoon, and he would take all of your spent or losers off your hands, and he would ship them directly to a slaughterhouse. Well, since an expose by HBO in 2008, the industry got smart and they started using brokers, and there's plausible deniability. But make no mistake, they're still going to slaughter by the multiple thousands. So just getting back to that figure, historically, we have been sending 100,000 plus horses, that's all kinds of horses, to be slaughtered in Canada and Mexico. There have been only two studies done to try to identify the specific breed. And one study had the percentage of thoroughbreds of that total 100,000 at 19%, and the other one had it at 16%. Now, I use thoroughbred as synonymous with racehorse because that's what a thoroughbred is. So quickly, you can see how these numbers just become overwhelming. So 19% of 100,000 horses is 19,000 thoroughbreds every year going to slaughter. The numbers have come down because we're not shipping as many horses across the border to be slaughtered, largely because of pushback by activists in Europe and Asia, where this horse meat is processed. And also, of course, there are less horses running in horse racing, which we'll get to. But clearly, we're talking about multiple thousands. In fact, in 2019, just 4 years ago, Alex Waldrop, who at the time was the president of a major industry-related group, the NTRA, admitted to USA Today that 7,500 American thoroughbreds were going to slaughter every year. Now, I'm telling you that number is understated, but just take a moment to think about what was said and who said it. One of the most powerful people in US racing freely admitting that each year, multiple thousands of his industry's supposed athletes are being bled out and butchered for meat. Imagine that. At the slaughterhouse, again, I'm vegan. I'm sure probably most of you are also. So it's all bad. All animal slaughter is bad. But it is, if you can imagine, that much worse for horses because they are flight animals. Okay, so their first instinct is to flee. And as soon as they enter these slaughterhouses, the sights, sounds, and smells around them have them in a sheer panic. In addition, once they get them into the kill box, they're not stationary targets, again, because of that flight instinct. So it often takes multiple shots, either with a .22 caliber rifle or a retractable metal bolt to the brain to render that horse either unconscious or outright killed, which by law is supposed to happen prior to the bleed out. Often this takes multiple shots. There are undercover videos in case anyone wants to explore this any further from Canada. There's one in particular that haunts me to this day. This man standing there with his .22 caliber rifle at I don't know, maybe 10 feet away from the horse, taking shots, wasn't able to do what he was supposed to do on within a number of shots. The horse was obviously injured and flailing about, ran out of ammunition, sauntered across the floor, very nonchalant-like, to reload, got back into position, and took more shots at this horse. Again, it's horrific. And then after that, of course, they're strung up by their hind legs and they're slashed through the carotid arteries and bled out. And again, sometimes while still conscious. So it's horrific. And that is how most spent or simply no longer wanted racehorses end their lives. And I call it equine hell. There's no other way to put it. So when you look at the track deaths, stall deaths, and the slaughterhouse deaths combined, we're talking 15 to 20,000 maybe every year. I use the word carnage to describe what's happening in the American horse racing industry, and I don't back off of that word one iota. It is carnage. So that's the general overview of horse racing, and that's how bad it is. It's very important for you to understand, and of course, this is supposed to be about activism. So how can we help fight back? And Nicole and Jen are going to talk about some things. But one part of this issue that absolutely has to be addressed is that roughly 75% of the tracks in America are being propped up by taxpayer subsidies, corporate welfare, massive amounts of corporate welfare. It's a crucial component because we could be as wildly successful in changing hearts and minds, and we already have been. We are winning this argument. But as long as these laws remain on the books in state after state, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Louisiana, West Virginia, et cetera, as long as these laws remain on the books, these exploiters and these abusers are going to laugh all the way to the bank, regardless of how few people are sitting in the stands. Harness racing doesn't get a lot of attention. I don't know if you're familiar with harness racing, but it's a rider in a buggy. They call it a sulky. No one cares about harness racing in America. In fact, I would argue that with the exception of maybe Cal Expo in California, maybe Meadowlands in New Jersey, there would not be a harness track in existence today if not for this massive subsidization. Just to give you an idea of the numbers here, in New York, there are 11 tracks, and here's how it works. So around 2003, 2004, and it started happening at the same time in multiple states, the horse racing industry realized they could no longer compete with casinos, full service casinos, and state lotteries. This is long before sports betting. So now they're even further behind. So they went to these legislatures and they said, look, if you don't help us here, if you don't give us a leg up, then you are going to be responsible for putting so many thousands of people out of work. Well, I'm convinced that they picked these numbers out of thin air. These are wildly inflated jobs numbers, but politicians, being politicians, didn't want to be on the wrong side of that issue, so they voted these subsidies in. The irony, of course, is that for decades, dog racing and horse racing had virtual monopolies on legal gambling in this country outside of Nevada. And then, of course, they're going to turn around and cry they can't compete. So this has been going on for 18, 19 years now. In New York, we have 11 tracks. 9 of the 11 have what are called racinos. It's a combination racetrack casino. And basically, the casino part are glorified slots parlors. But the problem is people that are going up there to bet at these slot parlors are unwittingly supporting the racing industry, because a portion of the revenue that is generated with those bets is going to prop up the racing operation in the form of purses, higher purses, and breeder incentives, etc. So we're talking $230 million per year in New York alone. That's $1 billion every 4 years. They've basically, I think they're at over $3 billion since 2004 in corporate welfare. That's money that should have gone back to the state for things like education primarily. Instead, we are propping up this dying industry. Just a couple of quick facts here. Belmont Park, which is the third leg of the Triple Crown, attendance has plummeted 88% since 1978. It's down 94% at Aqueduct. So clearly, the racing industry is losing and would have lost by a large measure years ago, if not for this massive subsidization. So this is something that we are addressing. We are part of a coalition here in New York trying to go after those subsidies, and we're hoping that that can be a template for other states. Again, as long as those laws remain on the books, these people are going to continue to abuse and kill horses. So it's really important that we make people aware of it, and then we start pressuring our legislators. And we were surprised. We shouldn't have been, but we were, when we went down to lobby back in March. We went, Nicole and I and a bunch of us advocates went down several times. How many politicians had no idea that these laws existed? So again, this is a big part of this story, the subsidization. We're talking about 75% of the track. So when you see Churchill Downs on Kentucky Derby Day, or the Preakness in Baltimore, which will be a week from Saturday, or the Belmont Stakes, just keep in mind that's horse racing at a tiny fraction of tracks on just a handful of days each year. And those horses are being abused, believe me, but they just hide it a lot better. But horse racing's very core is ugly and mean and cruel. And so I appreciate your time and listening to these various wrongs and these unsettling wrongs. And of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have after Nicole and Jen have talked.
Thank you, Patrick. So we can go over to Nicole now. So Nicole, you can take it from there.
Everyone. Okay, I'm trying to see the screen here. Okay. Hello, I'm Nicole I know Patrick had a lot of heavy things for everyone to absorb. I know a lot of you have heard this before. Some of you may not have known so much about it, but I'm Nicole Arcello, Executive Director of Horseracing Wrongs. And I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. There's quite a few of you here, and I think there's a large number of people here. I think that's great. The fight to end horse racing is fairly new in the animal rights movement. So before Horse Racing Wrongs came around, I know Pat talked about this a little bit. There was no one with concrete data, no documentation of the deaths of the horses that are used for racing, no deep dive into the cruelty, everything Patrick just talked about. And essentially these horses were suffering in silence and dying unnoticed for over 150 years. And I'll get into why I say 150 years in a minute, but my background in activism goes back about 14 years. And I protested circuses and traveling animal shows for Free Friday, pet stores, all of those cruelties. So when I partnered up with Patrick, I learned what he uncovered. And then I thought about horse racing's crown jewel that's right in our backyard, Saratoga Racecourse. And Patrick mentioned that quickly. That's one of those big elite tracks. It's fancy hats and celebrities and picnics and the August place to be. And it's also billed as the oldest sporting venue in the country. So there's that word sport again. So from previous experience, my activism experience in protesting and previous experience of Saratoga Racecourse, I was brought there as a child by my parents. We went every summer at least once. I went a few times as an adult. I knew the layout. I knew what the racing form looked like. I knew what the handicappers were talking about, the odds, the picks, all of that. And I also knew that the people in there had no idea what was happening. Remember, this is hidden very well. So I knew that the horses were being paraded through the middle of the fanfare. They were shiny, they were being doted on. I knew that most of the people weren't at the rail right at the track watching the races. And I knew they weren't seeing anything bad. They weren't looking at the monitors, not at a track like that. They were partying. But even if something bad happened, they wouldn't see it because it's super, super hidden. But they were watching cruelty without even knowing it. They were watching horses being whipped. They were watching all of those things in the horses' mouths, and all of these things they're hooked up with that Patrick was talking about. So we started protesting at Saratoga Racecourse. So that's how we started. We became from Patrick's data, from a blog into an organization, and we started protesting. We started printing up materials, and we became a nonprofit in the process. So we, Jennifer's going to talk more about the protesting part. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of tracks, because for those of you who want to get involved in protesting, it's important to know that there's about 100 tracks in the country, and they're all very different from each other in a lot of ways. So, but a few other things that we do first is that we sponsor protests, we send out materials and help, and Jennifer's going to talk about that, so I don't want to talk about her things. But we have mobile billboards at all the big races, all the Triple Crown races. We have mobile billboards. We do static billboards, digital billboards. We have what are called right now, that just went up in the city of Baltimore, 125. They're called wild postings. They're these big 48 by 72 posters that are spread throughout the city of Baltimore. And we'll be repeating that in New York City. So we try to really, it's about educating the public as much as we can. We want people to know this is cool and to not attend. So I'm going to talk about the different kinds of tracks. Patrick talked a little bit about some of them in his talk, but I'll just elaborate a little bit. So there's pretty much two different kinds of horse racing. There's harness racing, where the jockey sits in a cart. It's called the sulky behind the horse. That jockey, he or she definitely has a whip, and the horse is being whipped. It's all the same cruelties. It's a different breed of horse. It's a standard bred horse. And then there's flat track, which is where the jockey is on top of the horse. And that is mostly thoroughbreds, but also a lot of quarter horses race on flat tracks as well. You hear more about thoroughbreds, I think, just in general. There's elite tracks. We talked about Saratoga. There's Santa Anita. There's Churchill, or the Kentucky Derby. There's Gulfstream in Florida. So those are the tracks where the celebrities go, that the big races are at. Those are those big fancy places that Patrick was talking about. And then there's the other tracks. There's Thistledown in Ohio. There's Mountaineer in West Virginia. There's Finger Lakes here in New York. There's parks in Pennsylvania, and many tens of more. And those are more seedier tracks. The people going in there are gamblers. The people going into the harness tracks, to back up a little bit, those are where most of those racinos are. So you're not seeing a lot of people. There's no one in the stands. And I think Patrick talked about that a little bit with the subsidies. So people going into those harness tracks are not going there for the racing. They're going there for the slot machines. So, and that's propping up the industry. So when we'll have Jennifer talk. I'm trying not to overlap Jennifer, sorry. But we'll help if you want to protest these different kinds of tracks, how to do these effectively. But when you're protesting or you're out there doing outreach, it's really good to be seen by the cars driving by and the public as well, and not just the people going in. So those, one thing to educate everyone, you know, if you can do that, if you live near a racino, a horse track that has a casino, please tell every single person you know, do not gamble there, because like we said, it props up horse racing. So we do not want people to do that. So that's one thing you can do today. Don't go to events at these places. Sometimes they have like events. Sometimes they have shows, they have nightclubs, things like that, but just know that they're trying to draw people in there for the casino. So let me see. Oh, so now we're, Jennifer talked about more protesting, like I said, but here's ways you can help every single day. So our website, we just launched a brand new website. It's still the same URL. It's horseracingwrongs.org. And there's a lot of information on there. We will be doing probably some kind of webinar on YouTube to kind of help people navigate it, but I think it's a really user-friendly and there's a lot of information on there. So that's one thing. You can always share information from our website. We have an action group on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, we do a lot of actions. We'll have people write to sponsors, we'll have, or tweet or comment storms. We'll have people write to legislators. We'll have whatever, you know, an act. It's all actions. So we don't let people post in there, get in arguments in there, conversations. It's actions. So when we post it, it's something you can do whenever that day. We tag you in it. We do tweet storms. We do social media storms. We do storm events like media storms, where we'll have, Jennifer was very successful with these in Maryland, really getting activists to reach out to media saying, cover this, cover this. And we got a lot of media attention from that, just having the media just keep hearing the same thing. We have a writers group where if you like to write, we like people to write little longer things, longer letters and emails to horse racing sponsors, especially for the big Triple Crown races, to write letters to the editor. And if you have a special talent, we would love you to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or wherever, or Nicole@horseracingwrongs.com. And you can let me know if you'd like to volunteer in any way, if you do some graphic design, or if you're a social media expert, or if you want to help in any way like that and offer some talents up, you can do that as well. So I think I talked kind of about everything I wanted to talk about. I don't want to go on too long. So we can get to questions and Jennifer. So I'm going to pass it on to Jen.
Jen, you're muted.
All right. So hi, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for joining us. And I'm Jennifer Sully. I'm the Maryland organizer and board member for Horseracing Wrongs. And so two of my key roles as a board member is to try to get more people involved in everything that we're doing, and also to try to recruit activists to, you know, hopefully cover events in your own state and things like that. So I'm going to kind of dive right into all different forms of activism that you can do and actions that you can take to help the horses. The first one being media storms and tweet storms. So that would be sending emails and massive tweets to a specific target, specific audience. As Nicole had mentioned, these media storms help gain momentum to cover other events. So we recently, on March 18th, a horse named Lady Macho had been killed at Laurel Park. And so immediately a media storm was created. And thanks to everybody kind of getting involved and sending all these emails to the media. And then there was, I think, another media storm a week later when another horse was killed. And so long story short, going fast forward a little bit, Laurel Park had suspended races for a little bit, one of the main tracks in Maryland. And so when we had reached out to them, I had called them to cover the protest, they said, oh, we've gotten like bombarded with emails. And so these media storms are great, and it really gets a lot of people's attention and everything. And it's a good way to get people involved. They're very simple. Typically you can make, what I do is I'll just make like a template. And then as soon as I hear that a horse has been killed, I, plug in the pertinent information for that horse, and then invite everybody, and out it goes like pretty immediately. So, and they're very effective. So there's that. And then, and I did want to mention that you don't have to be a resident of that state to take action in a media storm. So if you see a media storm or a contact storm of any sort in New Jersey, let's say, and you live in Pennsylvania, you can certainly, take part. So, and then there's contact storms where you're contacting a specific, maybe a sponsor of a big race, or a music act at one of the big races, things like that. Again, while sometimes they may not be successful as far as getting the music act not to perform, it's reaching a whole lot of people, it's educating a lot of people. And this is all about the more people we can reach, the more people we can educate is key for the horses. We're their advocate, we are their voice. We need to reach as many people as possible. And then the next one I wanted to talk about was plain clothed leafleting, which would be just wearing, basically, as it sounds, like your street clothes, and just blending in with the crowd. This would be a good event to take part in at like a state fair or somewhere where there's a lot of foot traffic and things like that, where you can hand out leaflets and, again, educating the public. And then the next form of action that I found is, protesting used to be like my favorite thing, that it's still, I love my megaphone, and I love getting out there and protesting, but doing outreach and leafleting and actually interacting with the public, it's all sort of a work in progress, and you kind of learn as you go along. I used to think that standing in front of Laurel Park every single week and causing a scene and, and yelling, it's great, and it served its purpose. But what I found out moving into it is that I get a lot of positive interaction when we're at Pimlico. There's a group of us who go out to Pimlico almost every weekend, outreaching and leafleting to the public. And it's good. You can have these very informative interactions. We, tell people, sometimes you get 15, 20 seconds to talk to the public. So, I always sort of meet with the group beforehand and tell them, this is what we're going to say. And so right now, we're informing people that an average of 35 horses are killed at Maryland tracks every single year, which drops a lot of jaws, and it usually leads to further conversations, which is great. Again, the more people know, because most people don't know. This is so hidden, and until recently with the deaths at the Kentucky Derby and a whole bunch of media getting involved in the last week or two in Baltimore, the more people are getting to know. And but these brief interactions can lead into something even longer. So sometimes people will ask you, well, gosh, how are they dying, and things like that. So again, it's educating and informing the public. What I usually do with, as far as how to choose between, where to protest and where to do outreach. Again, sometimes we'll do outreach at Pimlico while they're live racing at Laurel. It's all pretty much for those who are interested in organizing, which I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you pretty much have to kind of look at your track, look at everything around. So at Pimlico, there's a red light right in front of the track. It's a great opportunity. People have to stop. So So it's just a great opportunity to talk to everybody. Whereas Laurel Park, there's no stop sign, red light. They kind of pull out of Laurel Park and can stop for 2 seconds and keep rolling. So it's a little more difficult to leaflet there. So you just kind of, again, just see kind of, the layout of the tracks and things like that. And then also, if you have like a lower number of attendees, an outreach event is sometimes, better than, 5 people out there, on megaphones and, and doing a protest. It's usually, I found, more beneficial when I've had 5 people at Pimlico, for example. We've covered a lot of ground and handed out a ton of leaflets. So it always is, a very positive experience to do that. And also state fairs are another place where there can be a whole lot of foot traffic to do leafleting. And unfortunately, as Patrick mentioned, I mean, these horses are dying everywhere. And so, even state fairs, every track, there's no track where horses aren't dying. So those places, it's important to cover as well. And then the next form of activism would be a silent demonstration, which this can also overlap with outreach and leafleting. You can do, like we've done visuals for the horses and just stood there holding memorial posters with the horse's name and the day that they died. Sometimes you can do candlelight vigils, things like that. It's a very peaceful event. And I find that sometimes even the most silent and quietest events can speak louder than the loudest protest. Like it sometimes can reach even more people just standing there silently with the posters. Another form of action would be to do protests. And so this would be something that you would want to definitely do on like a big race day, sometimes the beginning of a race season. There are tracks that race year round while others don't. So opening day of the season of that track is always a good time to do a large protest. But again, they don't even have to, actively be racing that day for you to take action in front of the track, because it's important that the public sees you out there on a somewhat regular basis. And people recognize us at Pimlico, where as we're setting up and breaking down, people are honking at us and we get so much attention there. They just know who we are. And then, protests, the loud protests, megaphones are encouraged. However, I always tend to not use the sirens. We want to be mindful of the horses. We're there to advocate for them. We're not there to potentially spook them. And so we have to keep an eye out for trailers. Some tracks more than others have trailers of horses going in and out. And so whenever you have a loud protest with megaphones, you always want to turn off the volume when the horses are coming out. And I never ever use sirens in any of the horse racing protests ever. Also, another thing to be mindful of is where the track is as to where your activists are standing. And so at some tracks, such as Laurel Park, the track is so far back that the megaphones aren't going to scare the horses or anything like that. Pimlico, the track is a little bit closer, so we tend to point our megaphones towards the street and send the volume that way. So, you just have to be mindful of your surroundings and the horses, of course, because that's our main priority, is to, speak up for them and do the best we can for them. And then, as Nicole had mentioned, joining the Horseracing Wrongs Action Group on Facebook, because that's got a whole bunch of all of these that I've mentioned. If anybody is interested in running an event in their own state, please reach out to me, DM me on Messenger. You can email me at standupforliberation@gmail.com. Reach out, anytime, you can certainly reach out to Nicole as well, but I'd be more than happy to assist you with any sort of preparation for an event, and we'll guide you all the way. We'll send out materials such as posters, leaflets, and bracelets. Those of you who are interested in running regular events, we would even send a banner potentially. So there's that. Horseracing Wrongs will also send out press releases prior to any large protest to try to get the media out there. I will personally help, share your events, invite others, promote it and things like that. The whole Horseracing Wrongs team will stand behind it 100% and help you out in whatever way you need. And I also can help. One of the things on the side that I enjoy doing is writing chants. So I can, send you a chant sheet and thing like that as well to help if that's, if that's something you need. And then no matter what action you do decide to potentially organize or participate in, we always want to stay as professional as possible, as kind of open-minded as possible. You're always going to get someone who's going to want to argue with you and things like that, but it's key to just stay on track, on the mission. We're there for the horses. We're there, representing Horseracing Wrongs, but we have to be the best advocate for the horses that we can be. And so, while, people, want to yell and start stuff, when people do that stuff, I just focus even more on the horses. I yell louder through my megaphone, or I, hold my poster up higher, or whatever the case may be. I don't personally engage in a whole lot of like negative interaction that way. And I feel like it kind of goes further, I think. So it's just really important to do that and just state all the facts, confidently about the horses. And in saying that, all of the statistics and all of the information about the horses who have died, when they've died, details are found on our website. So, if you need any information about the horses, in your state, go right to our website. There's a plethora of information there, and please utilize it. So it's, important that we stay, 100%, factual. And then I'll wrap this up, but I mentioned the memorial posters. I think those can be extremely effective, having the horse's name, the day they died. We have what we call the horse cemetery, and at Laurel Park, the whole entrance of Laurel Park on up one side and down the other is posters that were personally made with all of, not all, there's way too many, sadly, but a whole lot of the dead horses over the years. And people see that, and I think that's eye-opening, also. And also at Pimlico, we have a horse cemetery there. And so keep a positive professional attitude, that's key. And the top priority, again, is advocating for the horses, being the best and, biggest voice we can be for them, and, educating as many people as possible in, the best way that we can. So again, reach out to me if you're interested in covering any kind of events or anything like that. And just as a reminder, there are 2 very large protests coming up for any of you who are interested. I know I've probably invited, I know some of you, but the Preakness protest is here in Baltimore on May 20th from 1 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. And then the Belmont Stakes is, for those who don't know, Preakness is the second leg of the Triple Crown. And then Belmont Stakes is the final leg of the Triple Crown. So that's on June 10th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, we can send you links to the events and all of that if you're, interested in joining those. But thank you so much for listening and everything, and for joining us. And
thank you. Thank you, Jen and Nicole and Patrick. So now we're going to begin taking questions. I know that we have a bunch of questions in the chat, so I'm going to go through those. And the first one is from Ron, who asks, is there much cross-pollination between horse racing, rodeo, and farm animal activism? I don't know if Jen, you want to answer that or someone else?
And can you repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry.
Is there much cross activism, cross pollination between horse racing, rodeo, and farm animal activism?
We know Eric Mills, I know very well. He's been involved in the rodeo issue for a long time now. Of course, we know activists in other issues. We are so hyper focused on horse racing. So, when we have a chance, of course, we will go to protests for other issues. But as far as when you say cross-pollination, we support other groups and they support us. So I guess that would be the short answer.
Perfect, great. And Elizabeth asks, to whom are the email or Twitter storms directed? Elected officials or racing authorities?
They could be for depending on the action. So sometimes, like we just did a tweet storm, we do a tweet storm for all the big protests or the big races. So we just did one for the Kentucky Derby. We'll do one for the Preakness. We'll do one for Belmont Stakes, and we'll do them for Breeders' Cup and sometimes Travers Day too. So they are directed to the hashtag so for the Kentucky Derby, the tweet storm is directed to the hashtag that the Derby was using. So hashtag KY Derby was the official hashtag of the Kentucky Derby. So when we set up the tweet storm, we use our hashtag, which was End Horse Racing. And then we just flooded that KY Derby feed with all of our information, so the truth about horse racing. And then sometimes we might do like a storm for sponsors of races. We might do like the media storms that Jennifer was talking about. Those were for media, and all of that information is in there. So when we do, say, a media storm, you'll have emails, phone numbers, and Twitter handles or social media handles. We have a campaign for Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars, I'll mention really quick, was going to perform after the Preakness on the same day on May 20th. And we have a petition going for him, and we've been doing outreach and tweet storms and contact storms to teach him that he should not be supporting animal cruelty as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Anne asks in the chat, have you ever worked with animal rights lawyers, students, professors to get more legal info so you can file complaints with the police? And the second question she asks is, have you tried to work with Europol and Interpol?
Nothing on the latter, but certainly we have had many conversations with animal rights lawyers. The big problem, as it is with all animal exploitation industries, is that the law defers to what is considered common industry practice. So, for instance, that's why you can castrate a farm animal without anesthesia. It's the same reason you can whip a horse. It's just always been done. In addition, they'll always say, well, the state racing commission has jurisdiction there. So as far as trying to, maybe the question is, could you pursue an animal cruelty charge through the local DA's office? It's never been done, not to say that it couldn't, but again, it's a really steep hill to climb.
Okay. So Lois asks, what type of activism is open for folks that aren't near a racetrack?
Jen, you want to take that one?
Probably doing, I would say to run their own event or to join?
For activism, so maybe like the writers group or the Horseracing Wrongs Action Group on Facebook. Especially if you like to write, we send you email me, and then I'll send you the link to sign up, because we don't publicly put our writers group link out. I have to send you a link to sign up to the group, and we send out assignments. We try to send out 1 or 2 a month, and then it'll be to reach out to sponsors and educate them. Sometimes legislators, sometimes you know, so Bruno Mars was one of them. So there's things like that. And then you can also, you know, ask for more assignments and we can give you things to do as well.
And Anne
And-
asked, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, in the action group on Facebook.
Can you put
I'm
that
always
in
plugging that.
Put that in the chat, the name of the group?
It's a Horseracing Wrongs action group on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are you going to work with celebrities to get the message out? I mean, other than, I guess, just commenting or tweeting at Bruno Mars, I guess do
Love
anything
to
It's,
ask
else.
celebrities.
It's awfully challenging, but we work hard at it, and we've had some positive comments from people like Bill Maher. As a matter of fact, Katie Couric's office just reached out to me to write an op-ed for her newsletter because of something, and Nicole could probably tell you what happened on social media because I
Oh,
don't follow it too
have to do
closely.
that.
But
Yes.
yeah, but go ahead, Nicole.
Yes, we haven't talked about it yet because the op-ed's not written, but it's okay because so this is where those contact storms really do make sense. So and she's a local advocate and she follows Katie Couric and she commented that, you know, this is please have compassion. Katie Couric posted a video. It was like a throwback video from when she was at the Derby 5 years ago and she won $800 or whatever. She had her winning ticket. And so there was tons of negative comments, our comments, the truth comments. And I think it moved Katie and I think she commented back to somebody else, and then our advocate zoomed in there and said, look, you need to talk to Nicole and Patrick. And she messaged me right away, very excited. Katie DM'd her and she sent our information and then we got the phone call. So you never know when those, I think that a lot of us say, oh, you know, and that's why I push the action group so much, because I think it takes like a minute out of your day. And I think we can all take 1 minute out of our day, no matter what we're doing, because it's so defeating animal rights and it can be so depressing. And I think that taking those positive things and all of those seeds you plant, look, when you plant seeds, things grow, right? So you don't know what's going to flourish into something big, but there's always somebody watching. Someone else was reading those comments too. So I want to really encourage people to do that, because that's a really huge thing, you know, that came out of it. And, you know, I was hoping she would take her video down, but maybe she's leaving it up.
Another simple thing that can be done, and it's an old school form of activism, but a letter to the editor. We've had a lot of advocates over the years write them and they get published. It's all about controlling the narrative and influencing the narrative. See, when we first started, we were dismissed as animal rights extremists and admonished to work with the industry to reform it. We were told you'll never take down horse racing. And we have stayed true and consistent to our messaging from the beginning. This is animal cruelty and this must end. It is no different from dog racing, not a whit different. In fact, I would argue that it is worse than dog racing because of slaughter. And here you have dog racing is prohibited on moral grounds in 42 states. And currently there are only 2 dog tracks left in the country. So we will get there. I have no doubt about it. And it's all about grassroots activism. I talked about the subsidies. I don't want to send the wrong message that you know, we can't reverse those laws. The only way we can reverse those laws is by changing the public narrative through the media and getting the public on our side. And then the politicians will listen, they will follow. And there have been editorials by the Washington Post and the Philadelphia Inquirer within the last 3 years, and largely owing to conversations that I had with editors at both newspapers. Those boards came out calling for horse racing to end, not to be reformed, but to end. That's a sea change from where we began. And just today, the LA Times wrote a similar editorial. The board wrote a similar editorial. So that messaging that horse racing could end, or that horse racing should end, is finally starting to win the day. So again, it's all about whatever you can do, whether it's on social media, and of course, Jen and Nicole know that area better than I do, but again, something as simple as writing a letter to the editor, very effective.
That is great. That is such a hopeful story and great reminders there about planting seeds, things we all can do. If you have a computer, you have the internet, you can do it. So I'm going to go to the next question. This one also might be for Patrick to answer, but it's from Deb. Is there any difference between quarter horse racing and thoroughbred racing as far as the separation, confinement, and slaughter of the horses?
Nothing, no different at all. No, it's the same exact situation. The horses themselves are different, of course. The quarter horse racing is shorter, but as far as the way the animals are treated, exactly the same way.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
This might be for Jen or Nicole from Risa. If we're not on Facebook, are action alerts emailed as well?
Yes, so if you want to join our writers group, you can email me, Nicole@horseracingwrongs.com, and I can get you hooked up with the writing group too. And if you're on other social media, sometimes we share those actions there too. Our
There's
Twitter
also-
person's very good at sharing everything. Sorry.
There's also a website that's the DMV Active Vegans that shows a calendar of all the actions and that are local, around here. So that's also helpful.
And our website will have all of our events on our new website too. We still have to add those because the website just came out.
Can I just say one thing on protesting? I think it is the single most effective thing you can do as an activist is to go out there and protest. And again, this is not something that comes naturally to me. I'm more quiet and reserved. Nicole actually started the protests up in the Saratoga region. But when you go out there and you voice your outrage about something, and if you have enough people, the media will come, and then you're able to trumpet your message to an exponentially larger audience. And just think about this: every great social justice movement in our nation's history, civil rights, gender rights, sexual orientation rights, right down the line, started in the streets. And the same thing with animal rights. We have to show people that there's something wrong going on, and you have to voice your outrage and represent these poor, abused animals. So again, I can't say enough about protesting. And you don't have to get involved in chanting if you're not comfortable doing it. Just stand there and hold a sign or pass out leaflets. But just be there, be present, if at all possible.
Yeah,
If
I'd
you
like
can't
to
tweet.
add on to that. I mean, there's something for everyone, and there's an action for everybody, for people who are, like, as Patrick said, people who are shy, people who want to get on their megaphone and yell their lungs out. There's something, or if you are a homebody, there's plenty of online actions to do. You can advocate for the horses in so many ways. And so, a lot of them don't even take that much time. The media storms, things like that. There's, like I said, there's templates created and things like that, where it's just plugging in your name and hitting send. And it's made a huge impact here in Baltimore, the media storms over and over and over, and they know who we are. So
yep.
Personally, I like to yell my lungs out.
Yeah.
I'll be one of those. So there's another question from Elizabeth. Are you connected with the many horse rescuers who are fundraising and buying horses from the auctions to save them from slaughter? And then, of course, I'm also wondering, is there any particular sanctuaries that have been able to take horses in that you'd like to give a shout out to, and so we can support them?
Should I take
That's
this one, Patrick?
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a delicate issue because as far as horse rescues, I can safely say, most horse rescues in the US, and there's a lot, hundreds, are not against horse racing. They may be rescuing horses from the kill pens, out of the slaughter pipeline, but you may see them. I get messages, teary voicemails, phone calls almost every week during certain times of the year, especially around this time, Triple Crown time, where you see horse rescues having derby parties, horse rescues cheering on a Triple Crown hopeful. And there's multiple reasons about this. Got one last night. There's multiple reasons for this. Sometimes they're being funded by the horse racing industry. Sometimes it's an industry organization like the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. Just the name tells you everything. They put a gag order on any rescue that they fund, help fund or fund somewhat, and that you can't talk bad about racing. They maybe these rescues are getting funding, donations from racing people, and sometimes they think that horses need a job. So we do find that the animal sanctuaries that are animals like kind of like the farmed animal sanctuaries that have horses are aligned with us. They have the broader, vegan abolitionist message along the way. But we do, that being said, we do have some people that we work with behind the scenes to do some rescue and at-risk horses, and we do that as much as we can. And we can't do that publicly because it would be danger to the horses.
Great. Okay.
There are a few horse rescues that I know and that I've been starting to work with, so we can kind of develop, some abolitionist ones.
Cool.
Hope
Yeah,
that
if you
answers
have the
your
names
question.
of any of the rescues that you support, so we can watch for them and follow them and support them, or any of the sanctuaries.
Yes, we'll be working
feel
on that and
free.
getting something on our site soon. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
So Mary asks in the chat, who can we make accountable to enforce the animal abuse laws? Or you were saying there really are no laws.
Well, in a nutshell, racehorses aren't covered under animal cruelty statutes. That's the bottom line. So it's unfortunate, but the state racing commissions are the regulatory agency that's supposedly overseeing horse racing, and that's who makes and enforces the law. Now the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority is more of a federal supposed watchdog organization. But as far as law enforcement, we're not going to see much remedy there.
Okay. I was just wondering, with the recent win in Philly, I'm sure you heard about the horse carriages due to activism, that they're going to be transitioning completely to e-carriages. For horse racing, do you think it's a good sign and people will connect the dots, or do you think it'll be more independent and separate?
No, absolutely. I believe that every one of these wins goes to the broader victory that we all seek. It's all about connecting the dots. We talk about that when we talk about single issue campaigns and how important and vital they are. It's all about, again, conditioning the American mind to start thinking about animal rights, and then having them draw that connection between the horse carriage industry and the racehorse industry. There's no difference, obviously. And if we're going to ban one, then shouldn't we be looking to ban the other? It's the same thing: dog racing, horse racing, the rodeo, horse racing, whatever. It's all about connecting dots. I think that's a perfect way of putting it. And so these are all important wins, and we all want the same thing here, right? And that's how we get there.
Exactly. I knew you could say it well, better than I ever could. So Anne asks, will you work with book authors like children's books, documentary makers, movie makers like Disney to tell the real stories behind horse racing? And yeah, there is so much speciesism in movies. It's not even
right. Well, we 4 years ago, we were at the Animal Rights Conference, and there was a filmmaker screening his film Long Gone Wild, which was sort of a sequel to Blackfish. It was about the orcas in SeaWorld. And he was stopped at our table, and he spent a lot of time looking at things, and he was just shaking his head. And I said, boy, I would love for someone to make a documentary on this issue. And he was shocked to hear that no one had. So we struck up conversations that week, and we developed a friendship, and we created this treatment for a major documentary. He lives on the West Coast, and me back here in New York. We had trouble getting some funding initially, but eventually he was able to hook up with some producers out west. And long story short, we have a Warner Brothers documentary coming out on horse racing this fall. So the only regret I have is that it didn't come out now during Triple Crown season. I thought it would have been, more impactful. But we have been working closely with the filmmakers from the beginning. I put them in touch with my wish list of contacts. We've seen a couple of rough cuts of the film. our hope is that it will be our Blackfish. It'll be that tipping point moment where people can't stop talking about it, wherever it ends up, whatever platform it ends up on. We're hoping that it catches fire like Blackfish did. And so, yeah, that's real exciting for us as children's books. Actually, we have two people who are closely associated with us who have written children's books based on our work and horses that we have highlighted on the website. Nicole can put that out as far as the names of those books, so you guys could support them.
I think one's not out yet.
Yeah, that's right. Bill's isn't out, but Linda's.
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Linda's is I Promise You Bolt.
Right.
Great. You can put those in the chat if you like.
Mhm.
Anne wants to know, are there any sponsors who have actually stopped sponsoring as a result of your actions?
Yes. We reached out to Lyft a couple years ago, and we launched a campaign. We found the I don't remember his title, but he was like a higher up, and we found his email, and Patrick wrote a letter and sent it to him, and we sent it to him again, and I told him I was going to ramp up a campaign against him. I had a picture of him and was going to put it on a change.org petition. And before I even got that far, he came back and he said, we're not sponsoring this year, and we're never going to sponsor. We pledged to never sponsor a horse race again. So that was really amazing, and it was really great. And I don't know if we publicized it enough, because I was just so happy that this guy did this, and I was afraid that the industry would put pressure on them. So we kind of just took it as a win, and it was a couple years ago when we sent it out. So we're working hard on sponsors. I think horse racing sponsors are typically alcohol companies. Mostly, I mean, there's BMW and Ford, John Deere sometimes. There's a couple water companies this year, so we're really going after them. But we also found, for a lot of you, really quick, if you ever use Barnivore as a vegan to find the vegan wines and liquors, there's a lot of these horse racing sponsors that are listed as vegan on Barnivore. So we've put out some graphics about that with the information on our social media to make sure, because when I was on Twitter getting the Twitter handles for some of these sponsors, I noticed that you can see on Twitter, all of 35 of your followers or 100 of your followers follow. And I said, why are all these people following Casa Amigos, liquor? And it was because, they were listed as vegans. So all these vegans are drinking this and following this, and they're sponsoring animal cruelty. So that was a really interesting thing to find. So we're really, working on, ramping up a campaign about that too. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
that was great. Wow, I mean, I'm just so impressed with how much coverage you're doing and covering every angle, and really amazing work. And do we have any more questions? Did I miss any questions in the chat, or we have time for maybe one or two more, maybe kind of quick questions? So go ahead and put those in the chat again. If I missed you, I apologize. There's
Can I
lots
just-
of great comments. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Nicole.
I just wanted to say one little piece of inspiration here, because I know I'm sure everyone have seen all of the media attention around the Derby. Wasn't typical media attention around the Derby this year, because 7 horses died before the Kentucky Derby race at 7 o'clock on Saturday. So this wasn't covered before, and it's because of all of you, all the work we put out there, all of you getting it out there to more people, all of you that protest, all of you that take part in all of these, everything you guys are going to do after this, after you're inspired. Because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, horses were dying. It was happening, but no one was paying attention. No one was reporting it. The media wasn't reporting it, but because we're just constantly out there, the media has no choice to cover it. And I think when Patrick was on one of the podcasts he was on today, they said, what's different? And he said, plain covering it. And because nothing's changed. So it is nothing's changed in the industry, but there's a huge change in the landscape in hearts and minds, and everyone knows now the truth about horse racing. And if they don't know yet, they're going to know. So I want you all to know that it's not hopeless. And I know that it is hard being an animal activist. It's defeating almost every single day when you sit down and you really think about how much these horses are suffering or how much all the animals are suffering. And I think that it's so important to remember all of the positive things, and that you can do something and you're not alone, and we're all here, and we all answer our messages. We all answer our emails and Facebook messages and social media messages in 24 hours, and we're all here for you. So I just wanted to say that to everybody to kind of boost everybody up.
Thank you so much. We needed that. I think the last question will be, will you join LinkedIn, from Anne?
We are on LinkedIn. We just got on
The
LinkedIn.
answer is yes. Horse racing
So
Wrongs.
yes, we are on LinkedIn. Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, any other questions? Really some great feedback. Everybody's giving some wonderful feedback. So if everybody could just hang in there for a few more minutes, I'm going to throw it back to you guys, maybe just for any final words, anything else you want to leave us with. I know Nicole left us with a wonderful, hopeful message, which is what I was going to ask for. Please leave us on an up note, leave us energized. But Jen or Patrick, any final words from you guys?
Just that, I know in my heart and soul and beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're on the right path, that we are making progress every single day. And while, these things take a lot of time, it's all about just perseverance, determination, just we're not going to stop until this is over, and it will be over. So we're making a lot of really positive, steps in the right direction, more than ever, I would say. So, please join us. Please consider covering an event in your own state. Contact us. We'll help you. I'll guide you however I can. The more of us out there speaking up for the horses, the better.
That's perfect. I'll let Jen have the last word. Couldn't say it better myself.
Awesome. Excellent. There was just one additional question. Are there actions to take all year round?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So in our action group, we have actions all the time. So, it could be, sponsors or, all the other things we talked about, legislators, things like that. There's protests all over all the time. We need more tracks covered. So hopefully we'll hear from some of you that want to organize. And there's always something you can do. And there's also just every day you can Patrick blogs constantly, sometimes 6 times a day. So you can just keep sharing all the time and just keep getting it out there. The more people know that horse racing is animal cruelty and it kills horses, then the better.
All right. So if everybody's feeling energized, go ahead and put in the chat how amazing you're feeling. And if there are some actions you're inspired to do, go ahead and share that in the chat as well. And I'm going to wrap up. I'd like to announce a few of our upcoming workshops. We have regular workshops. On May 30th, AAM's police liaison training will be happening. On June 2nd, we have Ending Speciesism, the History, Future, and Power of the AAR Movement. On June 8th, we have The Humane Hoax, How to Expose Happy Meat, Humane Dairy, and Ethical Eggs, with author Hope Bohanec. On June 15th, we have You Can Teach an Old Dog New Tricks, Going Vegan Later in Life, with Eric Lindstrom, Director of Farm. Okay, and many more workshops to be announced. And again, please check out our previous workshops archived on our YouTube channel, and subscribe while you're there. I'd also like to announce our 2023 live events. The Colorado Convergence is taking place in and around Denver. The dates are June 24th through July 1st. The Portland, Oregon Convergence is August 4th through the 12th. The Ohio Occurrence is September 1st through the 3rd in and around Cincinnati. You are all welcome to our live events. No experience required. In fact, we love to have beginning fledgling activists join us, but registration is required So you'll find the events on our Facebook page and our website. Maybe Trey will put them in the chat. Also, go ahead and drop your Instagram handles in the chat, anyone who would like to do that. Please consider becoming a patron by finding AAM on Patreon. Your donations allow AAM to continue to provide free educational resources for activists, which ultimately saves more animals. And that wraps up another AAM workshop. Thank you, Nicole and Patrick and Jen, for your time and wisdom. Thank you all for being here and the tireless work. Round of applause there for you're doing for the animals. Each of you deserves a round of applause. And again, if you're interested in becoming a mentor or a mentee or want to get involved, please reach out to us. If you'd like to be in our email newsletter list, please drop your email in the chat. Okay, and until next time, from Electra and I, stay strong, everyone, and live vegan. Thank you.